Hello, theme park enthusiasts, and welcome back to Planet Coaster and to Appleford Amusement Park. In this episode, I'm going to work on something different for the park. Last episode, I built the first thing that sort of is a ride, but isn't actually usable by the guests. In this episode, I'm going to build an actual restaurant for the park. Now, we do have that sort of fast food location that I built near the entrance, but on the other side of the Wilder Mouse here, I wanted to go ahead and put in an actual restaurant. So we're going to put in a pizza restaurant here, and with it, I'm going to spend most of this episode sort of doing the design of the building. Basically, we're quickly just getting it set up here. For the restaurants, if you haven't played Planet Coaster before, you basically put in an entrance like I have here, and then you put in boxes. And each of the boxes symbolizes a room of the restaurant, so at least one table that people can use. Here I'm just sort of selecting the different things that I want sold at the restaurant, so basically trying to get a fairly Italian restaurant menu going on, and things that kids would enjoy as well. So with this, also was wanting to just make a few adjustments. But as I said, the primary thing I'm going to be doing in this episode is working on the overall look of the building here itself. Now, I like the way that the restaurants work in Planet Coaster. I'm glad they added in restaurants and hotels. I think that's a really cool feature. In my next major park that I plan on doing, I plan on using the hotels. For Appleford Amusement Park, I feel like it's sort of an older park and it wouldn't really have a hotel on site. So I didn't really feel like that was necessary. But a nice restaurant in the park I thought was. I mean, yes, you want those fast food places where people can go in and just grab a meal and such, but you also do want that type of thing where when people want to, they can sit down with their families and enjoy something fully. So that's sort of my idea with this place. And I'm going with sort of what I'm considering a European theme to the building. Originally here I'm just putting in walls and I was thinking just adding faux windows to them, but then as I played around with it more, I wanted the building to be more than just a basic box, and I wanted there to be some visibility to what's going on inside the restaurant. So that's what you're going to see me playing around with here, is just trying to figure out what things it is that I want as far as the building design and such. And there is going to be a decent amount of usage of things off the workshop here as well. So this is a lot of adding and deleting. Quite frankly, this building took me more time than I really had expected it to, because I thought that this would just be a fairly quick slap in place thing. I wasn't even planning on it being its own episode. And in the end, it actually turned out to be a longer episode than a lot of things that I've done in the park, because of the amount of detail I wanted to put into the building. So while I sort of liked that European style to a point, it just didn't fit exactly what I was going for. I wanted something that I felt like screamed Italian a bit more. So I liked the sort of plaster style of these walls a bit, and was playing around with their colors. I felt like that they could work, and what I wasn't realizing at this point is part of what I felt was missing is I needed an entrance area to the restaurant. I needed a place where it was more visible, because as I said, while the boxes are nice and the fact that it actually functions as a restaurant is great, I want it to look like a restaurant too, and just having sort of a square box with no windows to it wasn't going to achieve that goal for me. So with that in mind, I really had to play around with the different styles and different textures and such to figure out what was going to work. So while I'm playing around with these colors a bit here, I do hope that you are enjoying Appleford Amusement Park overall. Quite frankly, I'm pleased with the way that the thing is coming out overall. It really is sort of matching what I had envisioned for the location. As I said, I was wanting something that really sort of had this feel of an older park, but one that's actually well loved and well maintained in a lot of ways. And so it's only at the corners do you sort of see the hints of wear and tear of the years. And I feel like I'm achieving that in the patterns that I'm getting, everything of that nature. So here I've sort of come to the realization that in order to get what I'm wanting, what I need to do is sort of create these rooms at the front of the location. I'm having to play around with the colors a bit just to get it to sort of fit what I want. fitting the color scheme of Appleford with that white, gold, and purple coloring. But I do like what I get there as far as the colors. So now I'm going to put on these windows over here because, again, I want it to sort of be this very regal looking place overall. I don't want it to look cheap. I want it to be a place that it's like, you know, you would want to go with your family in order to enjoy a meal. Then I felt like I needed a little something on top here in order to tie everything together some, because I felt like it still was lacking, especially in these corners. So, playing around with a little bit of design here. As I said, this park, I feel like I'm working on those little details much more than I have in my previous parks. The others were just recreations and such, and this is one that I have a passion for because it's my own creation. So I'm really enjoying being creative with it and seeing how it ends up turning out. I will say, even though I'm still in the process of this park, I already am thinking of the next park that I want to do. And in particular, I will say the next park, there's one specific ride in particular that I already have my mind on. And that ride is going to most likely be a multi-episode thing, because it is going to be a ride that pretty much is going to form an entire area of the park. Everything around the ride is going to be sort of determined by the ride itself. So it's one of those that the ride is going to be extremely important. I'm really looking forward to it, but I think it's going to push my creativity and my capabilities to a level that nothing else in the game has so far. So sort of the same thing here. I'm using this park in a way to get used to that level that I'm going to have as far as detail and such. And I feel like this particular place really does sort of highlight that, because I do need to put in detail to make it something that I would be proud of. So I realized those walls really didn't do anything for me there, and instead I just want sort of a little bit of a hide to that entrance to the actual part of the restaurant. So go with more of these simplified wood walls here. And as I'm working on it, as I said, sort of the idea of what I'm wanting is coming into vision for me, and I'm sort of just creating as I go, sort of figuring out what it is I want. Now, if you notice, I did leave one box empty at the back there because I already had in mind that I did want to put something back there also, again, to make the restaurant seem more like a complete living, breathing thing, where there's actual people in the rooms, everything of that nature. Now here, what I'm looking for is I'm looking through all the stuff that I found on the workshop, trying to find something to block in these windows. I like having the windows where I do on the building, but I want them to hide the interior, because the interior is just those boxes. So I'm putting in sort of these panels behind the windows just to block out the view of those boxes. I think I do play around with colors, if I remember correctly, on these, just to try to get something that I feel like will best hide what's going on back there. And this is one of those, looking at this stuff now while I'm also playing Park Beyond at the same time, it really does highlight for me the difference between the two games. While Park Beyond is attempting to do some of these same things, they really have not given the player the ability to create in this way. It just doesn't have the feeling that this game does, where you can really do anything you really desire, and you're not restricted much by what's going on. So with that, I really love this in Planet Coaster, and the fact that I can just be as creative as I want to be here. So here, I basically just want to black that out so it looks like a hallway to the eye as you're coming through the building. And as I said, we will put stuff into that room here in a little bit, but I just wanted that room so that way it had this different look to it. Here I realized that each of these pieces has a light on the back of it, which was not what I was wanting. That sort of took me by surprise and made me redo all that I was doing here. I did like the color and texture of the wall there, but I didn't want it to have the that red light shining through. So with that, I had to redo these things, basically removing the light or changing the light to, yeah, I think I just removed the light. It has sort of an ambiance to it still. It still produces a light, but it's not that colored light that was just sort of problematic for me. And here again, just trying to figure out, because I want there to be a doorway here, obviously, but I did not want it to be that light that was coming through type of thing. So I end up going with just adding a door to the room. I think that'll work out nicely for the location. And then it's sort of like a private guest room at the back of the restaurant. One thing I especially love about Planet Coaster, and maybe will be something in the future with Park Beyond, but I love the fact that they have really, so many people have put so many amazing things onto the workshop. I think it just really has this fantastic look to it, and it just really allows you to do a lot of creative things with your design without having to spend hours and hours making it yourself. So things like this floor, I really like the look of the floor, but I didn't have to actually design the floor myself. So then just adjusting where the door is in relation to that new floor that we put in. So what I decided to do here is I decided to try to make this into sort of one piece, so that way I can just add it to each of the locations, and then I don't have to worry about each one being done separately. Basically just trying to make sure I look through the window and make sure it all looks good. And we'll eliminate those. And for some reason it was not wanting to attach properly. I think it is one of those things that the more you add into a park, it does start to lag a little bit and such. And I was finding those being slight problems with this, but in the end what I ended up doing is just having to bring in the pieces myself, put them in one at a time, which is not the end of the world. Able to duplicate it fairly easily there, and then we can just move them to where we need them. Basically, as I said, I wanted something that sort of blocked the window, but didn't really look too abnormal. If you're just looking at it from a distance, it'll look perfectly fine. Because again, it's the one thing I wish that they would do. I know the boxes are probably the simplest solution for Planet Coaster in order to make a restaurant work, but I really wish that they had given us some way of doing an interior where it looked very lived in or used kind of thing. So as you notice here, there's many times that I'm sort of going out of the game for a moment, going into the workshop and looking for a new material, because I decided, you know what, I don't like the particular floor I have, so I go into the workshop, change it out for a different floor, or find a new floor, try it out, decide if I like it or not, then continue repeating that, getting what it is that I actually want in the end. Because I sort of do have a vision of what I'm wanting, but it is the challenge of trying to make it work in Planet Coaster. As I said, there are so many wonderful floors that people have done and everything throughout time in this game, and it was just one of those of finding one that I felt like fit most appropriately for this location. Also making sure that it's not clipping through anywhere that's going to be visible. Putting it as low as I can into the floor, and then just lining it up here so that way we make sure that it looks proper. as you can see here, one of the struggles is that the building's not quite long enough to house this without it showing out the side. So I think what I end up doing is just raising the ground ever so slightly to make it work. Just hiding it that way. I was pretty sure it was, and then here I just come back inside and make sure that I get the ground not to be sticking through the floor there. And here, just raising it a little bit so that it shows properly. Editing that ground just to make sure nothing shows on either side that's not supposed to. And then we have our flooring sort of set in place. And here, this was an easy one that it's like all I have to do is bring over a piece just to fit that square. Doesn't have to be much other than that, so it works out perfectly fine. And these I found on the workshop. I thought they were absolutely amazing. Somebody had done this great job with putting not only figures into a booth, but creating a booth pretty much from scratch. And I really liked the way the booth looked. I felt like it really added a nice luxurious look to the place. Didn't like the pirates that they decided to use there, but the booth itself I thought was perfect. And I figured I can go ahead and find some other figures to put into the booth that I prefer over the ones that they had. And this is something that I do plan as sort of a trend for the parks that I'm going to make, is I'm going to go ahead and use a lot of things that people have already created on the workshop, because why not? Why sort of recreate what's already existing type of thing? So this I thought was a perfect booth. I love the pizza. It looks like a delicious pizza, and since this is a pizza restaurant, I felt like that worked out really well. So I went ahead and put that onto the table. Same thing here, just taking some of the characters that are in the game from the Studios pack and having them have a nice meal together. Basically sort of hiding their mounts as best I can. I think in the end I might end up lowering, if I remember correctly, the entire location just so it has a look that feels a bit more realistic. Then here, I didn't want to go with a standard table like I had in the front there. My mind started drawing a blank, but a booth. That's what I'm meaning, is a booth. But yeah, instead I wanted sort of a table for more of a formal meal here. As I said, this is a private room, much more for like a romantic relationship or, you know, business meeting, something of that nature. So I wanted this to be something that's a bit more personal in that way. And decided, you know what, why don't we have a police officer here? We haven't used one before, so might as well have her here having dinner with her friend. Changing her colors to be that where she works at the park. Probably, you know, they both work at the park in some way. Originally, I went ahead and put just a pizza down here, but I just felt like it was missing something, and so I wanted to add in some plates and some other kind of food, just to try to make it look a little bit better. And you're going to see, I really sort of struggled finding food that I felt worked for this theme. I think these are mussels in the end, and I felt like that fit the Italian restaurant style a bit, so I went ahead and went with those. Then again, since this is sort of a private room, I wanted to put in lighting that I felt was appropriate. And it's, once again, just playing with different things, finding what I feel works and fits within the space and sort of gives the feel of the location that I'm wanting. I felt like the lighting there was perfect, gave enough lighting, as I said, would allow for a romantic location. Now, most likely those flames would be electric and not actual flames, but again, we do have to make those sort of compromises here in the game. So putting those also here at the front of the park, or at the front of the building, so that way it sort of decorates this a little bit better. And with a lot of this, I'm not so much thinking from the interior as I'm thinking looking through those windows. I want to make sure that things look good from the outside. So here, as I had said, I do go ahead and lower the seating. That way it just doesn't appear like the post for the people's feet are flying in the air and such. One thing looking back on this is I could probably change the booths to be purple in color instead of the red so that it fit more with the theme of the overall park, and change the flowers up as well. Something I might go back and do, but that's probably going to be sort of on the touch-up video toward the end as I'm getting pretty much the park ready to be open and available to guests. But for now, I'm pretty pleased with the way this came out. I think it gives a nice sort of as I said, sit down dinner option to the park that I think works. Here I'm playing around with just different designs because I wanted to have something that looked nice as far as the roofing and such, and trying to figure out what would work for the location. I like the plaster idea because I do feel like the bottom pieces are a bit on the plaster side, but it just wasn't going to work, and as I said, I was fighting the urge to have the place be sort of boxy overall, but in the end, I felt like this just sort of needed more of a straightforward appearance. At least the windows do stick out there some, so it gives some definition to the building, and it's not just flat all the way around. Here, I just wasn't happy with the way that corner had ended up, so I wanted to add in an additional piece here. And this is one of those things that is somewhat of a challenge in the game because of the fact that you're dealing with pieces that are then technically not part of the building, so you have to sort of play around with them to try to make them line up and hide the corners as best as possible. And I know there are a lot of people out there who do much better quality stuff than I do as far as designing a building and such. But as I said, I am actually pretty proud of this building. I think that it really achieves what I was wanting here, and it does give that sort of nice family feel to it. A place that you would come in a park like this to just go and enjoy a meal while at the same time still not feeling out of place for the park. It's luxurious to a point, but it's still family friendly. And that's sort of my whole thing here, is this park isn't intended to be, an ultra resort type of place, but it is a place that's got heritage and it's got an identity, and I want that to sort of carry through in the buildings themselves. So here then, I felt like that top piece was just bare the way it was, so I wanted to continue this decorative piece that I had put along the front and put it along the sides as well here. These are the kind of things that I feel like just take so much time when you're creating, because they really do sort of just have to be moved the slightest amount just to make them work exactly as you want them, kind of thing. And for me, I am very OCD with such things. They have to fit properly, they can't be out of place or such, or my eye will just continually be drawn to them. So it's one of those that, like here, I had tried to put it in completely straight and it just was fighting me as to get it straight. So I get it fairly good, and I have to call it good enough because I think I spent probably a good hour trying to get these pieces to be straight, and it just was maddening. One trick I have noticed is if you pull it up to the top, then you can sort of use it as a straight edge more along the building itself, and that does help in sort of figuring out what you're doing. So, a little trick there I would suggest for people that are struggling with something like that. As I said, for me it was just not wanting to work properly, and does take a while here of playing with it. And in some respect, I feel like it's that the building itself is somehow not square, which I feel like that does happen in this game, and I'm not exactly sure. because you're building on a grid, so in theory, everything should be very squared off and boxy, but at the same time, it's just not. So here then I had a problem that I could not actually get the pieces I had just put on, and I had to start over again with another piece here instead of being able to just continue along. What I had wanted to do was just copy the pieces I had already put in and then sort of double them, but for some reason I wasn't able to click on them. I was clicking on the piece that was behind them instead, and so I had to start over again with a new piece and try to make sure that I wasn't going to have it vanish on me or become where I couldn't deal with it anymore like the other one had. And then here I'm being smart about this and going ahead and dealing with the back as one whole piece, so that way I don't have to try to do it one at a time like I was on the first side. It is a really good thing of sort of copying and pasting. Same thing here, I duplicate it again and I flip it to the front, so that way again I don't have to struggle with trying to make it exactly perfect like I was on the first side. It is a huge time saver to do so. There's still challenges of it, of course, but it's not the end of the world. So here, basically I decided to take this piece over to this side, duplicate it over, get it moved into place as I need it, and then I'll go ahead and duplicate over that last piece. Now it's probably using a little bit more piece count than it actually needs to, but you know what? I'm okay with that. I'd rather it be a little bit more than it needs instead of not being enough. And here I'm laying a sign for the front of the restaurant just to advertise what it is, deciding which sign I feel like works. And I like something like this where, as I said, it's sort of historic, it's sort of vintage looking, but at the same time it's still got that whimsy and such of an amusement park. And so with that, we're coming towards the end of this episode here. I'm going to go ahead and let you just enjoy the last little bit here as we finish up the building. If you did enjoy what we did in this episode, please go ahead and click that like button. If you've not already, please subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, so that you're aware when I produce new videos in the future. Thank you, and I hope to see you back for more Planet Coaster.